In this video, we will discuss how to annotate and modify your drainage profiles. Now, there's many different methods and options that you can do for modifying the drainage profiles, and there's some limitations with that also. But hopefully in this video, after you've seen this, you'll get some ideas of how you can modify your drainage profiles to get what you need. So the first topic that I'm going to talk about is the display of the EGL and the HGL, and also the concrete wall sections for those pipes that are in the drainage profiles. So let me go ahead and get to one of the drawing models, and you'll see on this one here that we have everything placed using the tools in the previous video. And you'll notice here that we have the HGL and EGL being displayed. Now, if you don't want those to be displayed, an easy way you can turn that off is to simply come up here and go to your level display, which is right here, or if you're back in your OpenRoads modeling workflow and you're underneath the Home tab, you can get to the levels right here. And inside of here, if we go to this right here, we got to go to this location. Right here, we have two different levels for the display of those two. So if you want to turn those off, you can simply just turn them off from here, which is perfectly fine. Or there's another way you can turn that off, and that is through the feature definitions. So if we go to the feature definitions, what we need to do is actually go back to the default model in order to do this. So I will go ahead and go back down here and go to the default model. And now what I need to do is in the Explorer, I'm going to go ahead and go to OpenRoads Standards. I will expand that out. I will expand out the file. And inside of here, we're going to go to Feature Definitions, Drainage, and Utilities. Let's go ahead and go to the Conduit, Stormwater, Drainage, Pipes, and then right now we just have that one pipe with this particular file. So what I can do is right click over it and go to the properties of it. Now inside of here, this is how this particular pipe is set up using the drainage seeds that are out there, and then also some of the displays right here. And this is what we're going to look at right here, is some of the displays for it. So right now, by default, we have it to display the EGL and display the HGL whenever you compute a profile run. Well, if you don't want that to be displayed whenever you do a profile run for this particular file, what you can do is simply come in here and change that true statement to a false statement. And I will do the same thing to this right here. And that will turn that off. Another thing that you may want to look at is your inner and outer wall for your pipes. Because by default, right now it's going to display the inner and outer wall for the concrete pipes. So if I go back to this particular drawing model, you'll see that we see the inner and outer wall right here for this concrete pipe. So if you don't want to display that, let's say you just want to see the inner wall and not the outer wall, you can come in here and turn that off by coming up here and selecting none for that, and it will turn that inner and outer wall. So that's how you can kind of display some stuff and always be displayed that way whenever you do a profile run with this particular file. Now by default, these here, the symbology will turn off and on as needed, and it'll update automatically. The EGL and HGL do not update automatically. So in order for that to display properly again, you either have to redo that profile run or you can regenerate it. So if I come back through here, and I will go to the Explorer, and underneath the Drainage and Utilities model, I will navigate down below here and go to that particular profile run, which is this right here, and I can simply right click over it and do a regenerate profile run. And now you'll see that display is no longer there. So that is an option if you want that to be displayed or not displayed. So those are some of the options for displaying the EGL, the HGL, either by controlling it through the feature definition or by controlling it through the levels. Next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some ways to place in your inlets and also your manholes for this profile for this drainage network that you have. Because in the previous video, the option that we used was the box method, which just shows a box out here for that particular manhole or that inlet that's out there. And these really cannot be edited. So if you come in here and you select that and you try to delete it, it's not going to allow you to do anything with it. Same thing for these pipes here. You know, if I try to delete it or do something with it, it's not going to do anything because it's looking back at your default model from that drainage network that you've placed. So there's a lot of limitations on what you can do with this right here because everything is looking back at that drainage network that you placed in the default model. So trying to edit this, it's very limited. But I will show you some ways of how you can edit that to make it a little bit easier for annotating and getting the stuff that we want on our sheets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to change my workflow to my MoDOT CAD detailing standards. And I'll go to cross sections and culvert sheets. And I'm going to come in here and place in my 2x2 side view for my 2x2 curved vein drain that I have placed. So I will go ahead and select it. And we're going to go ahead and place that right here because I have a 2x2 box right here and then I have a 4-foot manhole right here. So I'm going to go ahead and place those where it needs to go. And right now I'm just going to dynamically just drop it off here because I will go ahead and move it to the correct spot here in a second. So I'm going to place one right here. And I will place one up here also. And like I said, we'll move these to the correct spot here in a second. And then this other one, it was a precast manhole and it is paved. So I'm going to go ahead and use this one right here for this example. And I will just go ahead and place it right here for the time being. So I have those placed now. Now I'm just simply going to use my Microstation platform tools in order to move those to the correct spot. So I could come up here and change my workflow to my drawing workflow, or an easy way I can simply stay in this particular workflow and get to some of my tools is on my keyboard is to hit the letter Q, and this brings up some tools that you can automatically go to, which is pretty handy. So now I can come in here and just use my move tool. Now I'm just going to go ahead and move this one right here to the correct spot. So I will just snap to this right here, and I will move it to this spot right here. And you'll see that this box basically just represents the inside shell of that manhole. And we'll go ahead and stretch this out here in a second. But I'm going to go ahead and move these to the correct spot. So I'll snap to here, and I'll get to the middle of that. I will do the same thing for this 2x2 drop inlet. And then I will go ahead and do it to the beginning. Now on this one here, at the very beginning of your profile run, this one here we're going to have to snap it to a different spot. And I'll kind of explain why. Whenever it creates this one right here, it creates it as a different size. I'm not 100% sure why it does that. But I'm going to go ahead and snap it to this corner right here. And then I will go ahead and snap it to this spot right here. Because whenever it's creating this particular cell, it starts it at the very beginning of that cell, but it's not at the center of it. Let me go ahead and go back to the default model just to kind of show you what it's doing here. So that particular profile run is going from this node right here, going down, hitting this node right here, to this manhole, to this manhole, to this outfall. So now if I scroll into here, you'll notice that it begins right at this spot right here. So it creates the beginning box for that as a little bit of a different shape. But if I go back to here, I can snap it to this point, and that's exactly where it needs to be at. So now what I'm going to do is simply just stretch these particular cells up to the correct spot that they need to go. So I'll just hit the letter Q again, and I will go ahead and hit manipulate, and then we can go to the stretch tool. I'll go ahead and make sure AccuDraw is running. If it's not running, I can get AccuDraw running by clicking on this little icon right here. I'm just going to go ahead and put a fence around this area right here, and then I will snap to this right here at the top of it, and I will hit the letter X to lock in my X, and now I can just stretch it in my Y direction to the spot that I need to go. So maybe I'll just snap to the top of this box that's out there as a representation of the manhole that's out there. So I'll snap to that point, and then now I have it stretched to the correct spot. Now I will go ahead and do the same thing for these other three. Snap to there, lock in my X, and then I will snap to that point right there. So once I've done that for this example here, you'll notice that I still have these boxes right here still out there. Well, I can turn that off if I don't want to display those anymore. All I would need to do is simply come up and go to my level display, go to this right here because it's looking back at that default model, and then there's a level in there that's called drainage structures. I can just simply turn off that level, and you'll see that it will turn off those structures. I don't want to do it to this right here because this is where I'm actively in this drawing model. So if I turn off the drainage structures with this right here, it's going to turn off the ones that I just placed. So just kind of keep that in mind. So I can turn that off or on as needed. Same thing for the drainage profile run. You can kind of see it's real faint, but if I want to turn that particular level off also, I could turn that off. Or if I want to turn off the proposed terrain, which is the profile for that, I can turn that off as needed also. So those are some options to place those inlets out there to make it a little bit more of a representation of what we want for our drainage profiles that we depict on a particular plan sheet. And of course you can modify these to the correct specs for that particular drop inlet or manhole as needed. I'm going to go ahead and zoom into this area right here. Now I think normally for concrete pipes, normally we show the inner and outer wall for those, but there are some issues with that with the program that we're currently using. Let me go ahead and show you that right now. So if I come in here and go back to the Explorer, and let me go to OpenRoads Standards. Actually, I think I have to go back to the default model to do this. So let me go back to the default model, OpenRoads Standards, and go to that particular feature definition again, and go to Properties. Then I can go back to this right here. If I would have tried to have done that while I was in the drawing model, normally it doesn't show up in the listing for my feature definition. So normally if I want to go to a feature definition, normally I have to go back to the default model. So let me go ahead and turn on the outer wall profile for that pipe. and now it's turned back on. Actually, I have the wrong one. I have it in plan view. Let me change that to the profile. So now we show the inner and outer wall. The problem with it though is if you zoom in here, you see that it goes to the actual inner wall for that particular drop inlet or manhole. There's no way I can come in here and trim that back to kind of clean that up. So that's really the kind of a drawback with the system right now, is it doesn't trim it back to this wall or this footing or whatever. Just kind of keep that in mind. This is where you may have to do some other manipulations to the drainage network to depict it the way you want. For this purposes right now, I'm going to go ahead and turn that back off. But I figured I would show you that because there's no way I can come in here and modify that. So just kind of explain that. You know, if I go to Q and try to modify that, let's say I want to use my trim to intersection. You know, if I try to do that, you're going to see that this element is referenced because it's looking back at the default model for that particular pipe or that drop inlet or that manhole. So that operation cannot be done. Let me go ahead and just change that back here. The last portion that I was going to talk about is putting some annotations for the pipe or the drop inlet or the manholes that are out there. Of course, you can use your normal Microstation tools and go to your plan notes or your profile notes and so forth to annotate those as needed, which is perfectly fine. That's probably a little bit more flexible on how those notes can be placed out there. Just keep in mind you have to keep those updated as needed if something changes. Or there is an option where you can use the civil labeler. That is an option too, so I will kind of show that right now. This one here, I will have to change my workflow to either OpenRoads modeling or OpenRoads production, or I can also use the drainage and utilities. And underneath the drainage and utilities, since we're talking about drainage, let's go to the drawing production, and then let's go ahead and select a civil labeler. And on this one here, I will expand out drainage. And we have some default ones that you can utilize for your project. Now you can create your own also, or if it's something that you always use, we can actually add it to our MoDOT defaults as needed. And if that's the case, just give CAD Services a call and we can add that. But let's say I would need to annotate this pipe. Well, I can come in here and select the one that says, let's say, conduit length and slope. And it gives all these parameters for it by default. Of course, you can change these as needed. We're not going to talk about that in this video, but if you're ready to place it, you just hit place. Now you just identify your drainage conduit. Let's say we're going to annotate this conduit right here. And then we go ahead and accept it. And then now we can place that label wherever it needs to go. Go ahead and hit escape to that. And you can do the same thing for this one here and this one here and place those wherever it needs to go. Same thing for your manholes or your drop inlets. You can do the same thing for those. Now, in order to do that though, I'm going to need to turn on that drainage structures level that we turned off earlier. So let me go ahead and go to my levels, because if I try to label this right here, it won't know what the elevation is or what the rim elevation is or what the invert elevation is, because it doesn't know how to pick that up back from the default model. So let me go ahead and turn the drainage structures back on, as you can see right here. And to make it a little bit easier for right now, I'm going to turn off my drainage structures that's contained inside of the drawing model. So it's just going to show that for right now. But we'll go ahead and switch it back once we get our labels placed. So let me go ahead and let's just select the one that says node, name, and elevations. Like I said, by default, we have these set up to accommodate most situations. You can change those as needed though. So I'll go ahead and select place. It says identify where you want to place it at, and I'll just snap to this bottom corner right here for this drop inlet. And you'll see that it gives the name of that drop inlet, where however you placed it from the default model. It also gives you the rim elevation and also the invert elevation for that. And then I can do the same thing for the manholes right here. So I can label those as needed. And like I said, those are all supposed to be looking back at that drainage profile that you created from that default model. So if something changes here, these labels here should also update accordingly. But now, since I have those labels placed, if I want to go ahead and turn off my drainage structures now and turn on the drainage structures that I want to depict for my profile whenever I produce it into my sheets, I can go ahead and turn that back on. So it looks just like that. Now, if I just had these turned on here and I tried to use my civil labeler, just to kind of show you what would happen. And I try to place that. I can come out here and I can select that element, let's say right here, and I will just go ahead and drop it off to place it. This is what I'm going to get. It places the label, but it really doesn't know what information to grab for that. It doesn't know what the inlet actually is. It doesn't know what the elevation is because it's just a Microstation element. That box there kind of holds the intelligence because it's looking back at that default model for how you place that drainage structure out there for the depth of it and so forth. So just kind of keep that in mind. I'm going to go ahead and do a undo to remove that. So those are some options for modifying and editing your drainage profiles that you have. Like I said, there's many other ways you can do it. You can manually put your notes in and so forth, but hopefully this will give you an idea of creating the drainage profile and then modifying it as needed for your drainage network that you have. And then if you have further questions on doing that for doing drainage network or drainage profiles, feel free to call CAD support and we can help you further if needed.